everyone, Virginia here. We're going to be talking about the trigeminal system and how it affects your experience of tea. Let's get started. We're going to be talking about three basic teas, but of course, what we're going to say is actually going to apply to all kinds of teas. The three teas in question are going to be green, oolong, and black. And what I'd like to ask you is, what do you feel when you look at this particular cup of tea? Is it going to be looking hot, or is it kind of cool or cold? Is it going to be refreshing, or does it feel more warm, comforting, and cozy? Because when we just look at something, the color gives us a feeling. Yellow, for example, tends to feel for us cool and refreshing. And the question is, why? Here we have a cup of tea, a green tea. We have a yellow dot, and we have a refreshing looking, right? A lemonade with ice and mint in it. And it turns out that refreshing drinks in our own minds tend to be yellow. And in fact, this is accomplished through memory of past trigeminal experiences with yellow substances, such as lemons or a lemonade or a green tea. And what is the trigeminal system? Well, it's a system of nerves that goes to speak to the brainstem, and it has three branches, hence the trigeminal. The top branch reaches the eye, including the cornea. The second branch reaches the nose and includes the olfactory patch. And in fact, when you smell an aroma, you have simultaneous activation of the trigeminal nerve. That second branch also reaches the palate and your upper teeth, your gums, and what you may or may not know is that you have a host of taste buds in the upper palate, and those taste buds, each of them has a little branch of the trigeminal nerve attached to it. And the third branch reaches the lower mouth, including the tongue and the lower teeth, and each one of the taste buds on the tongue, for example, has a branch of the trigeminal nerve. So when something activates either the olfactory patch or the taste buds in the mouth, you're going to get simultaneous activation of the trigeminal. And what the trigeminal nerve responds to are textures, something is slippery or soft, and also to temperature. The receptors on the trigeminal nerve that sense temperature in the nose and the mouth go all the way from fairly cold sensations, like ice, for example, to cooling sensations. A nice cold glass of water, for example. And then you have a set of temperature sensors, receptors that sense things that are slightly warm, a little bit warmer than a cool glass of water. Things that are quite warm, like a piece of fresh toast that you just made. And then we have also sensors that sense things that are hot. But what's fascinating about these sensors is they also respond to food chemicals. Here are examples of foods that activate the trigeminal system. At the cold end, we have foods like broccoli or mint or lemon. You can think of those as cool. And in fact, there's the ad for the mint, which talks about it being so cool. And lemon, again, lemonade, that mint, that picture of the lemonade and the mint gives you that cool feeling. And many vegetables also activate the cool receptors on the trigeminal system. Meat, donuts, and breads, that's to say proteins and carbohydrates, activate the slightly warm receptors. things that are sweet, things that are umami, meat-like, all activate the slightly warm receptors on the trigeminal system. And then, with respect to the warm, two food items that activate the warm receptors, for example, are tomatoes and strawberries. And of course, the classic hot item is chili pepper, but you should know that chocolate also activates, that's to say, dark chocolate, activate the hot end of the spectrum. What we've got here is the concepts that you get from activating these receptors. I've asked people what words would they use for things that in the mouth or that you smell are either cold or cool. And the word that most often comes up is refreshing. At the same time, you can ask people, and I have asked people, what gives you a slightly warm feeling? What words are you going to use for that? And of course, warm, but also comforting. And then finally, hot. One of the first words that people give me is zesty. Now, what I did was to go on to a whole host of websites talking about individual teas that they were selling. And I looked at what kinds of words people used for the teas. At the green end of the spectrum, the words are clean, light, and refreshing. For oolongs, they tend to be more on the order of fragrant or silky or even comforting. And at the black tea end, of course, as you probably can guess, the word zesty comes out, and spicy and strong is a very common word. And why do people use these words to describe these teas? Well, it turns out that all, or almost all, anyway, all that have been looked at, all the flavor chemicals in tea activate the trigeminal nerve temperature receptors, or we can also call them sensors, and enhance our experience of them. So, for example, here we have our thermometer again, and when we talk about green tea, chemicals that are in green tea are ones that have an apple smell, or a grassy smell, or a lemon smell. Limonene, for example, is one of these. We have also vegetal compounds, and interestingly enough, we also have roses, but it's the cool rose that you get that hasn't opened up yet, and is not it's the kind of rose you get from a florist, basically, not one you might grow in your garden. And that rose has chemicals, linalool, nerol, and geraniol in particular, which are also seen in your green tea and which give a very cool, cold sensation. With respect to oolongs, the kind of chemicals that are predominant in oolongs are again rose, but that in this case, it happens to be a damask rose, which is much less cool, has a much less cooling effect than the other chemicals for a rose bud, as it were. We have grapes, as you know. We have strawberry type smells. The typical one is called furaniol, and that is a classic strawberry smell, and that occurs in oolongs. You have smells of stone fruit, peaches, nectarines, apricots, and of course almonds fall in that category as well. And then, last but not least, you have honey qualities. And actually, strangely enough, honey, that sensation of honey, actually comes from the combination of two floral compounds, 2-phenylethanol and beta-damascenone, together give you that honey smell. And those compounds all activate the slightly warm to warm receptors, particularly the warm receptors on the trigeminal nerve. And then last but not least, of course, we have black tea. And for black tea, the compounds that activate the hot receptors include chocolatey compounds that are in chocolate, compounds that are in nuts, actually compounds that are in Multi, I couldn't find a picture that would represent malt, but multi falls into this category. It's isovaleraldehyde, and then compounds that have to do with roasting and heating up that tea as it's being made, and those are smoky compounds such as guaiacol and 4-vinyl guaiacol. So the bottom line from this slide is that each tea has a set of chemicals that is particular to it, and those chemicals are also very specific to which trigeminal receptors they activate. So when you get a green tea, what you're going to have is a more cool, cold, refreshing, clean, light feeling. When you have a oolong, you get a much warmer, embracing, comforting feeling from the activation of the trigeminal nerve receptors. And finally, you get for the blacker teas, the black teas, you'll get a more zesty, warm, strong feeling. And that comes again from the chemicals that predominate in that tea and that activate the hot receptors. Now, there is one important fact I want to add to this discussion, and that is that the trigeminal receptors can turn each other off, or in fact, they can cooperate. So, but let's focus a minute on the mutual inhibition, because this is going to be important for what we do with tea. Cold receptors inhibit the hot receptors, and the hot receptors inhibit the cold receptors. Keep that in mind, because astringency is a trigeminal sensation. You may have heard that the astringency is due to the polyphenols cross-linking the proteins in your saliva, and that brings together water into those cross-links, and the result is you get a dry mouth. But in fact, there are compounds that are astringent that do not actually cause the proteins to clump together and pick up water. In fact, astringency is a trigeminal sensation. And by saying it's a trigeminal sensation, the way that works is you get simultaneously activation of that hot receptor on the trigeminal nerve and the bitter receptor in your taste buds. And so an important question is going to be, what do we do? What do we do to cut astringency? Well, what we can do is to add lemon or bergamot to make your Earl Grey, or a dried ginger. With all of the chemicals in the lemon, the bergamot, and the dried ginger are going to activate the cold receptors. So if you have activation of the hot receptors by the astringent compounds, and you add some lemon, what you end up doing is turning off that hot receptor and activating your cold receptor. So the astringency is in fact cut. And that is because the hot and cold receptors can inhibit each other. The bottom line for this discussion is that the trigeminal nerves can serve as a volume dial for our experience of tea's flavors. What do I mean by a volume dial? It can turn them up, it can turn them down, it can shift them in one direction or another, from the sort of the more green tea type flavors to the more black tea type flavors. And that effect is courtesy of the trigeminal nerve.
Thanks so much for watching this video. Take care, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.